Următoarea prezentare, I'm going to switch back in English. It comes from Martin Lohnert, Managing Director, Void SOC Cybersecurity Operations Center în cadrul from Soitron Group, with a ransomware attack recovery, a subject which is always actual, in particular in these days in Romania. Martin, you got the floor.
Thank you very much. Let me just briefly introduce ourselves. We are Soitron or Soitron Group. We're an IT company that you probably haven't heard of, but we have been here for quite some time, since about 91. We serve customers around the European Union, outside, in the States, in the UK. Actually, we have offices in Turkey. And in Romania, you have maybe met some of our wonderful colleagues from DataNet Systems. But why my topic might be relevant today is because I'm responsible for our cybersecurity, let's say, division, or our SOC, where we provide mostly 24/7 cybersecurity services, like security monitoring, but like a whole catalog of other services. We also deal with the AI. We actually do some research in that area. We deal with industrial companies, automation, and so on. But today, for the next 15 minutes, I would actually like you to come with me from the future of AI back to today, to the present. And why? Is because this is what we are seeing a lot this year. Major ransomware attacks happening basically across the globe, but also in the region where you guys are present and we are also. And we get calls to these unfortunate companies that are sometimes not even our clients, but they get into a situation like this, that they're on the front page of the newspaper, and they ask for help because they don't have capacity, they don't have expertise, and many other aspects. And why we are bringing this to you today is that basically no one who has survived a ransomware attack is very happy to talk about it. What happened? How did they get in? What were some of the steps that we're actually taking? So we decided to extract some of this information. And just to give you a perspective, this is what we have dealt with some of the companies only in the last 3 months. And I'll take as an example, because I don't want to spend too much time on it. Victim A is a company where you as a CIO get a phone call at about 3 o'clock in the morning between Friday and Saturday from your team saying, like, everything is gone. And by everything, I mean everything. The backups are encrypted. If you actually had a very good backup policy that was backing up to the clouds, well, guess what? The cloud is actually erased. They delete the blobs and you lose access to the clouds. Your on-site backups are gone. You don't have access. All your servers, like virtualized platforms, are encrypted. The encryption is actually quite fast. It goes through a lot of data very quickly. So before you can recover, everything is gone. Many times you actually don't have access to the systems. In some of them, you actually do have access, but there's no data. And also, you have this lovely little notice that says that we have actually stolen your data as the attackers. And there are screenshots. So you don't have doubts that the files are there, that they actually have them, because they provide you with a sample. This is a directory structure of your client's report or your client's data that we have stolen. So here is a Bitcoin address, or here is a link to a chat where we want to negotiate with you about how much you will pay. I'll also name victim D. For obvious reasons, we're not naming the names or the industries, but this was, for example, a company that was actually having a proof of concept of a technology or a detection solution with one of our competing companies. And during the proof of concept, the systems show them an alarm saying something is not right, but they were not very sure about what's going on. They called us and basically wanted to compare our services in a real world scenario with this competition. And our team realized almost immediately that this company was actually under attack. At that moment, this breach was still ongoing. The attackers were still present in the infrastructure and were actually preparing to launch a ransomware attack. Fortunately, this stopped before the actually large-scale breach happened, but still it was quite a scary situation. So my question to you today is, what will you do when it happens to your organization? And the word in red is intentionally not if, but when. Hopefully, you will bring out this document that is your organization's incident response plan, actually tailored to ransomware and wonderfully updated this year. I don't want to ask for the raise of hands about how many of you have a dedicated ransomware incident response plan, because from our experience, it's not too many. If you don't have one, it's a good idea to actually at least think about it. And the main reason why we are preaching this is that when you start thinking about what to do during the panic situation, and in some of those companies, there was a cameraman in front of the main office with a reporter of a microphone, and the CEO very, very, very unhappy and asking you as a CIO about things to do, and like, are we going to have this up by Monday or tomorrow? So when you start like generating ideas what to do then, usually not the best ideas. So it's great to actually have it done before that. If you don't have one, there are many resources on the internet. Your companies or your partners can come up with one. This is just one example that, for example, we like to use. It's done by multiple US organizations. It's freely available on the internet. It's called Stop Ransomware Guide. There is actually a section about prevention. There's a section about incident response. So there are many resources you can use to create your own. But the important one, it should be your own, tailored to your organization about what to do. And also a disclaimer, my presentation is not a training about a comprehensive number of steps that you will need to do during the ransomware attack, because we have like 15 minutes, so that's not possible to do. But these are just some highlights that we are seeing happening across the companies that very likely you will have to go through when it happens. And it's a good idea actually to think about them before. So when it happens, you as a CIO get the call. It's like even better. It's the end of the month before all the processing starts happening, like payroll. We've had a ransomware attack just before the holiday starts. So before everyone actually goes on leave. It's usually before the weekend and so on and so on. The attackers generally think of them as very smart. They know what they're doing, and they will time the attack when you are not ready. It never happens on a Saturday on Wednesday at 10 a.m. when everyone is in the office and like ready to tackle this. So within the first minutes, almost immediately, what you will have to do is stop the attack from happening further. So if it impacted your segment or some of your servers, you will have to isolate and basically stop all traffic to coming and going. Some clients are asking us, like, can we turn off? It's not a very good idea to turn off the systems because you will lose forensic evidence, but you will have to isolate. Again, you'll have to think about how do we do this. Don't forget about the cloud. If you have cloud systems, it's very hard to isolate. It's a good idea to snapshot because it's easy to do. Again, you keep the forensic evidence, and it's a good idea to disable access to the cloud while you still have the access. So this is like the first few minutes about what to do. Then comes another set that usually the clients will need to do within the next few hours during the response. So this is a disclaimer. We have seen this many times. You stop the attack from like spreading in the first few minutes, and then the admins, they bring their own laptops that they've been using for the last like 3 years, and they start doing the admin tasks. That's not a very good idea because the laptops might have been breached because the attackers were in your infrastructure for the past days, weeks, sometimes months. and you don't know the state of the infrastructure yet. So whatever you do, don't use the existing PCs, laptops for doing the new configuration tasks. This is when you actually start investigating, like, so what happens? Is everything down? Do we still have parts of the infrastructure that are okay? You start looking at logs from your antivirus, from the IDS, if you have CM, EDR, any tools that you have employed. Hopefully, they were logging some events. You still have access to them, hopefully, so then you actually have you have information that you can start going through. This is to develop some understanding. It's very early. You see, it's still within hours, but you should start understanding what actually happened. And one of the first things that also you will need to do is change the passwords. This is a very common scenario, even with ransomware attacks, where you have some piece of software that's like running and encrypting your infrastructure. The attackers, let's say almost always, actually have access to your systems through either legitimate or privilege escalation. So you will need to change passwords. Again, it's a very painful procedure. If you have thousands of users, to change passwords on all of them, and how do you communicate? How do you give them the new passwords? Many things to solve, but this is very likely what you will need to do within hours to actually stop the attackers from doing more harm in your systems. And just some points about the basic password hygiene, like use strong passwords, don't reuse passwords in multiple systems, and so on, but you know this already. What you will also need to start doing within hours is to actually hunt for the attackers in your infrastructure, because they will still be there. Although you have disconnected them from the network, once you would reconnect, if you would reconnect now, the attackers have persistence. So the goal here is to get rid of them, and it's very difficult because they use different methods, and many times they use regular administrative tools. So sometimes they have specialized software that your antivirus can detect, but many times they use like group policy. They use scheduled tasks, they use domain admin accounts. It's like, how do you differentiate between what your colleague has done 7 weeks ago or what the attackers actually have done and scheduled to happen tonight 6 weeks ago? So many things to do, but this is an important part of the incident response about some of the things that actually will need to happen almost immediately after the attack. And please don't forget that if you want to pursue any kind of criminal offense, likely the organizations that are regulatory or your corporate headquarters will actually need some evidence. So please don't forget that you will need some people on board that are able to preserve and collect forensic evidence about what actually happened. And this is also within hours. You will likely need to start communicating to the law enforcement agencies, to the regulators, to your employees, to actually let them know that something happened. Maybe they don't have to come to the office in the morning. Maybe you will have still, very likely, you will still have systems offline. You talk to your partners, to your customers. You know better than I do, but a lot of communication will need to happen, and it's good if it's sort of orchestrated in a sensible way, and you are prepared for this. And then comes a very difficult phase that will take quite a long time. In some of the luckier companies and smaller incidents, it takes days. We have cases where it took weeks, and we have cases where it took several months to actually do this phase. You will need to adopt a paranoid mindset, definitely. If you have not already, because you still are not fully aware of what actually is happening in your infrastructure. If not, you will have to deploy multi-factor authentication, because if you want to, the goal here will be, and the pressure from your business and from your CEO will be, bring back services online. And for you to take the responsibility for that, you will have to start, let's say, measuring the risks. And this is one of the things that if you want to start enabling access back to Office 365 or your VPN. It's like crazy without multi-factor authentication. This is again very new to some of the clients, that if you think about a compromised network and want to bring it back online, you will need a clean infrastructure. So how to do this? We usually recommend setting up basically a new world, new VLANs, new network infrastructure, reinstall, so that you have segments that you can actually trust. Ideally microsegments, meaning one server per segment with a very well-defined set of rules about who can communicate to that segment, where that segment can communicate to, and so on, with the least privilege philosophy or principle, meaning the default surely should be deny all. And you will need to monitor, even with this new infrastructure, you will need to start looking closely about what's happening. Have we actually missed something in the threat hunting phase? That when we have systems that we need to bring back online, how can we be sure that the attackers are actually still not there and will not launch a second wave, by the way, which is very common, of ransomware or other type of attack? And this is the painful and long part of the systems restoration. Hopefully you have some backups, and we recommend not restoring the full servers, including the operating systems, because when was it backed up? Yesterday, 2 days ago. Well, guess what? You backed up the state when the attackers were in the infrastructure, because very likely they have been there for days and weeks before the attack. So how far would you have to go back to actually have a clean system? For that, we always recommend reinstall. And I know by looking at you that this is very scary, and it's sometimes actually very difficult, and sometimes even it's impossible. In those cases, maybe you will have to accept the risk that we are restoring a live system that we don't know what happens, but with the basics like the segmentation, and hopefully deployed some EDR tool that you deploy also, let's say, on some of the not really stable systems, where again, you can monitor and detect and hunt for the threats. Maybe this can be an acceptable risk for your business. But of course, patching and all these basic things, they need to happen for you to trust the systems. Once the systems are restored and with a certain level of trust or mistrust, you can move them into these new clean systems where they're still being monitored. And this is also where your team, maybe with some external help, can conduct what we call the root cause analysis, which is where you come to the original question, what actually happened? How did the attackers get into the infrastructure? How long were they there? And some companies ask actually why. So maybe it was financially motivated, as usually it is with ransomware, but in other cases, it can be let's say very unhappy employee, hacktivism, and other causes. This is also like towards the end of the incident, where you can have your team go through what was done, how did we do, what did we learn, and actually document it. Meaning, after the incident is over, you have a lot more gray hair, but also, hopefully you have some lessons that you can update your incident response plan, so that if this happens again, and unfortunately it might happen again, you are better prepared. And also, you will have a new microsegmented network with these clean segments. You will have systems that are hardened and are actually better prepared for the next wave of attack. Hopefully, you have changed all your passwords with this new password policy and some multi-factor authentication. Hopefully, you have deployed some tools on the end systems and the servers, like an EDR or XDR or NDR. You will need to have some monitoring and detection, just not immediately after the attack, but also, let's say, in the following weeks. So why not keep it? And hopefully you will have a new backup strategy with some verification that the backups are actually working. And once we go with the clients through this, let's say, closure, and we congratulate them on surviving the attack, the obvious question comes up. If we have done this 3 months ago or 6 months ago, at least some of these items, it's very likely that the ransomware attack either would not have happened because some of these items actually prevent the attacks, or it would not have been so devastating. So my message to you guys today is that you will have to do these things immediately following a ransomware attack. And I believe it's very wise to actually do them before. Thank you very much.
Well, I have to admit, Martin, that I think the biggest nightmare that the CIO could have is to be a victim of a ransomware attack and, you know, to wake up in the morning or a Saturday night when we are at the pub or whatever to see that everything is scripted. That's a nightmare. Now, well, let me ask you something. All the steps you mentioned, from you know, day number 1, first minutes, day number 2, the weeks after, and so on and so forth, shouldn't be part of a incident response plan? And if yes, should we test those measures?
Perfect. That's a great question. Thank you very much. So yes, the short answer is yes, yes. The longer answer is, of course, you should have an incident response plan. And just like backups, you have to verify that it works. So it's a great idea, but this is like the next level. First is you actually should have an incident response plan. And if you have one, let's not keep it in a drawer, but update it. And during the updates, it's actually quite fun to get the team into the room, get the stakeholders into a room, and have a simulation. It's quite actually a fun experience to do a tabletop exercise, at least a tabletop exercise, which is like a simulation where we only play with papers, because you will find things like, okay, so for restoring the backups, we need to log into here. Guess where the passwords are? And this is a true story. They are stored in a database of an IT management system that's on the server that's been encrypted. So they actually don't have usernames and passwords to log into the rest of the infrastructure because there are too many. And these are the things you can identify during simulations or tabletop exercises.
Yeah, and I guess you can improve your plan if you're testing, actually. Now, can you give me a flavor if I'm a company with, I don't know, like 1,000 end user computers and like, I don't know, several hundred servers? What is the time, expected time to recover if I have, again, several hundreds servers and everything is scripted? You know, starting, because we have to start with the Active Directory, right? In general.
In general, it's weeks and months. And
weeks and months.
And in some of the cases, it's measured actually by the percentage of what's restored. There is a very famous case from Ireland where a number of hospitals were encrypted in a single ransomware attack. And the report, by the way, was written was sanctioned by the government and was written by a well-known consulting company that said that I think within 12 months, they were still not 100% restored. It was a high number, it was 90-something%, but like it's almost impossible to go back to where you were before the attack. 1,000
end user, it's a small business,
yes,
right? So if you're telling me like weeks, a month, I mean, this message should pass through to the board of directors. Because Absolutely. If we tell them that in weeks and months, I'm going to restore the business, I would believe that they will be very involved in procedures to testing, the disaster recovery plans and stuff like that. Make sense?
Absolutely. I mean, and with industrial companies, these are some of our clients. The number one priority usually is to restore the manufacturing process. Even this is days at least. And if we're talking about big, let's say, industrial companies, a day of downtime, the costs are incredible.
Thank you very much, Martin.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely lovely presentation. So, yeah, so it was Martin Lohnert, Managing Director, Void SOC Cybersecurity Operations Center at Soitron.